If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 86 of the Leading Learning Podcast. In this episode, we talk with Paul Williams, Vice President of Professional Development and Education at Argentum, an organization that is implementing an assessment-based certificate, or ABC, program. Now, a couple of episodes back, we talked with Robin Galt-Winton from Castle about what ABC programs are and why learning businesses should care. So now we get to hear about what it's like to put one in place.
Before we hear that, though, we want to take just a moment to thank Castle, our sponsor for the second quarter of 2017. Castle is an accomplished full-services certification and licensure testing company that also offers its clients a variety of learning solutions capabilities. With an expert team of testing and instructional design professionals and a 30-year history of excellence in its field, Castle understands what it takes to develop and deliver quality learning and certification programs. To find out more about Castle's custom learning solutions, go to leadinglearning.com/Castle.
Related to Castle and to this episode's interview with Paul Williams, we also want to highlight that Castle is offering Leading Learning listeners a free 30 to 45-minute consultation with Robin Galt-Winton to explore whether and how an assessment-based certificate program might work for your organization. To schedule an appointment, all you have to do is go to leadinglearning.com/askcastle, and we'll also put that in the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 86. Now, Celisa, you got the honor of talking with Paul Williams about what his organization is doing. So what can listeners look forward to in that conversation?
Well, Paul and Argentum are in the process of creating and rolling out their assessment-based certificate. And so I think this is a great chance to talk with him because it's all very fresh in his mind what prompted Argentum to undertake an ABC, what the process of developing and rolling it out is like, and what lessons he's learned along the way. They're a little past probably halfway through the process at this point, so there's still things that he's out there discovering, still things for them to figure out, but has a lot under his belt, and that's what we talked about.
Well, I love it when we're able to introduce a major concept like this, like assessment-based certificates, something that really all learning businesses should be tuned into, and then also be able to offer an example of that concept actually being put into action, which sounds like is what we're going to get with Paul. So looking forward to hearing that discussion. Let's go ahead and roll the interview.
Hello there, I'm Celisa Steele, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Paul Williams. Paul is the Vice President of Professional Development and Education at Argentum, which is the leading national trade association serving companies that own, operate, and support professionally managed senior living communities in the United States. Paul, thanks for taking time for the Leading Learning Podcast.
Pleasure to be with you.
And since I offered only a very brief introduction of you, would you start off by saying a bit more about Argentum and your role there?
Yes. Well, Argentum, as you had indicated, is the leading association for senior living operators. And when we say senior living, we're really defining assisted living communities, memory care communities, independent living, as well as our companies also operate home health, hospices, and in some cases, though we don't represent them, skilled nursing.
Well, it sounds like very important and needed work that Argentum is helping these organizations provide. And for our conversation today, I'm especially interested in digging into an assessment-based certificate that I know you're in the process of developing and rolling out. But before we get to that piece specifically, would you just give us a bit of an overview of education and certification that Argentum provides in general, so we have sort of that bigger picture before we get to the ABC?
Yes, I think certification is actually something that we're fairly new to as far as Argentum. We had key industry stakeholders a few years ago, both within Argentum, but also some that are not members of Argentum, but certainly prominent operators and thought leaders and stakeholders in the industry. And one idea that galvanized from conversations was the need to professionalize the industry through certifications, certificates, lifelong learning opportunities for our professional and certainly staff at the community levels, again, in order to raise the bar for the industry. So what Argentum's first undertaking was to establish a certification for assisted living executive directors. We began that process in 2014, but 2015 was all development where we had subject matter experts from a wide variety of disciplines within senior living that were intimately familiar with what an experienced assisted living executive director needed to know in the way of knowledge and competencies. And so what that led to was our developing a certification for those assisted living executive directors that is based upon them meeting eligibility criteria, which at a minimum is 3 years in the assisted living executive director role, as well as that's with a college degree. There's also a path of experience for those that don't have a college degree. And then passing a 150-question examination at a remote testing center. So if they fulfill those rather rigorous requirements, they then earn the right to display the certification. Our actual certification is called the Certified Director of Assisted Living. So they become certified CDALs at that point. And we just had our inaugural class in 2016 where we had approximately 255 professionals that met all the requirements and passed the examination. So now we're in our subsequent testing periods, and that was really Argentum's first leap out of the box, so to speak, in the certification and professional development arena.
Well, great. And so in addition to that particular certification, I mean, do you also offer other education that are just kind of more on a course basis? Or I know you have an annual event. Do you have education as part of that, I'm assuming?
We do, and that's probably our primary, right now, the primary way that we develop not only continuing education opportunities for our professionals that work in senior living that require that, but certainly for those that don't require it, the conference provides our most visible mechanism for operators, C-suite executives, all the way down to staff level positions, to be able to learn about the latest trends and certainly very important aspects of their jobs and senior living in general at our conference. And that becomes that's our biggest learning opportunity for our senior living associates. We're also looking into right now through our Argentum's Workforce Development Committee and other types of learning opportunities. We're currently in the position of mapping out what that looks like, but we're certainly getting input not only from within the industry, but certainly with our collaborations with universities that are already offering senior living and aging development-related tracks of education. We're working with them as well as others in order to be able to bring that information in the most feasible way for not only our members, but certainly employees at all levels within senior living.
Well, that's really exciting. I know that there's a lot of talk in the association space around that role that associations can play in workforce development. So that sounds like exciting partnerships that you're exploring there. So let's talk a little bit about the assessment-based certificate that you're working on. And we recently did an episode on what ABCs are, and we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. I don't think we have to start with a generic definition, but I think it would be helpful to define your ABC, what it covers in terms of topic and scope.
Right. And let me just say that I think one of the issues we raised a little early in our conversation was, certainly as Argentum, along with other of our association and organizational counterparts, as we look at professional development and specifically in certifications and certificates, the first thing we evaluate is whether the program that we're going to develop falls more in line of developing a certification, a formal certification, or does the certificate meet our need? And for the ABC that we're developing, which is the Senior Living Sales Counselors Certificate Program, this was actually a brainchild of our Sales and Marketing Roundtable, which is composed of the chief sales and marketing executives of their respective companies. So these are really top-level talent, and they recognized 5 or 6 years ago that there was a real need, given that there are a lot of sales associates that are coming to work for senior living companies, that they don't always have the requisite amount of knowledge about the senior living industry, meaning like what different levels of senior living are there, what are price points, what are the different services that you receive in each senior living component. So they really felt that there was a big need out there for some type of program that would not only provide the requisite industry knowledge that an effective salesperson in senior living would have to know, but would also cover marketing strategy, specific to the senior living space, and the consultative sales process, which in some ways is very unique and has unique aspects working within senior living. So that's basically what we built the ABC program for Argentum. Was we built it around those 3 areas: industry knowledge, marketing strategy, and consultative sales process. Right now, where we're at in that process is we will convene an item writing panel, meaning they will develop the questions for the test. That'll occur next month. Then there'll be a validation and test assembly meeting later on this summer. Simultaneous to that, and actually this occurred before the item writing, we have been in the process of developing a module, and that's how the accredited base certificate program for the senior living sales counselors will work. Is there will actually be a training module that will be based upon the 3 areas that I identified before. And in order to sit for the test for the ABC certificate, all of the candidates will have to successfully complete the modules on those 3 areas. And once they have successfully completed that, then they will be eligible to sit for the examination. And of course, subject to their passing the test, they will then earn their certificate, the Senior Living Sales Counselor Certificate.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only thing I would add there is, even though it may sound like this is for people that are new to the industry, our companies within Argentum have committed to having this test taken by every sales professional in their organizations, including people at the top levels and top positions such as they occupy.
Oh, that's great. So you're going to have a built-in audience from day one then.
That's correct.
And so those modules, are those going to be offered online? Is that an asynchronous where people can kind of come in and do it according to their own schedule, or is that going to be place-based and on a set schedule? How does that work?
It's exactly, it is online, so they can do this at their work, certainly in their home, and they can, come in and check out. They don't have to complete it all at one time. So it's very much based upon their availability and ability to complete that. So, and as well as the test will be available, that they can take it online either in their home or certainly in their work sites or other areas.
Well, that's great. And, you mentioned that all the member companies have committed to having their employees that sort of fall into this sales counselor role go through the ABC. Is that offered at a fee to members, or is that included in membership? What's the economics behind the ABC?
There is a separate price for that. We're finalizing that. I mean, obviously we have an idea of what it is, and we've shared that with them, with the stakeholders, but it's fairly minimal. Obviously, what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for companies to be able to as we think it's important that they have their sales associates complete this, but it is an extra cost, and but certainly the savings are by doing it as a certificate program, which is the most appropriate thing. It's far less expensive to do it this way and still capture what we're trying to accomplish rather than roll this out as some part of bigger sales and marketing certification.
And do you have a sense at this point around how long those 3 modules and then the relevant assessments that go with them, how long that would take for someone to do?
I do know that the test is going to be a 75-question test. As far as the completion time for the modules right now, I'm not aware because we're still finalizing the modules, so we really haven't had people go through yet and beta test, length and, in a sense, iron out any kinks. That'll be something that we will probably have available by midsummer, as far as, and I could certainly provide that information then. But right now, the modules aren't complete to where we could beta length of time and any of the other feedback we're looking for before the live launch.
Yeah, well, it makes sense since you're right in the thick of things right now. So talk a little bit about the timeline. When did you begin work on this, and kind of how much time remains still until this is out and available?
Yeah, actually, we began this effort last summer. In fact, last June is when we convened approximately 12 sales and marketing professionals with extensive experience in Nashville to, in a sense, develop the job task analysis for this certificate. So through that work, they identified the 3 areas that the certificate will cover. Again, that's industry knowledge, marketing strategy, and consultative sales process. So they developed not only the 3 domains, but certainly the competencies that the test and the learning modules will cover in that. Then we, in the early fall, based upon their work, we, in a sense, did a job task survey that was sent out to a larger range of sales and marketing professionals. And through that research, through our test development firm, we were able to validate that indeed that the work that the job task analysis performed was right on the mark. So we had those 2 key events last year, and starting probably in November of last year is when we began development of the learning modules. So that work has continued on through small groups of subject matter experts performing that work, which leads us now to the stage where we're nearing completion of the learning modules, and we're going to start actively in the next month or so the item writing or question writing for the online certificate test.
And when do you expect that to complete? And I know I'm asking you to predict, and a lot could change, but I'm just trying to get a sense of the overall picture, because it sounds like up until this point it's been roughly 12 months.
Right.
And so then, another 6 months to sort of get the tests written, or do you think it'll be longer than that?
I think the test should be written and the test assembled by August, and we could be looking at November, December for the first launch of the people being able to take the modules and ultimately the test.
Well, great. So then that does sound like then roughly maybe an 18-month sort of timeline for you from... That's great. Well, one question I had is that and this may not apply as much to you, since it sounds like the ABC has one specific audience, those folks in sales, and your certification, that certified director of assisted living, really is for another set of your audience. But, was there any concern at any point around any confusion over kind of, the certificate versus certification, and that people might not understand sort of the differing values or what each one is actually confirming about that particular individual?
It's a huge learning curve, to be frank, because, I think any audience, and particularly credentials within the senior living industry, are fairly new. I mean, there's some that have been around, but by and large, I think it's been a large learning curve as we've had to communicate for the different programs, CDAO being one communication, and now the Senior Living Sales Counselor being another. And we have had sessions, both at our conference and I have performed them one-on-one for audiences, to kind of talk about the thought processes of how we determine whether we do a certification program as we did for CDAOs, and why we determined for the senior living sales, why the certificate program made more sense. So yes, there's a huge education part of it, and the other part of it that the average person doesn't know is just even about assessment-based certificates. I mean, there's a million different kinds of certificates that you can get that aren't assessment-based, and that most people, have to understand that for ours you have to pass a test, you have to go through the modules, whereas some of the ones that they may have had more experience with, it may have been more of a participatory certificate where they show up for a certain amount of days and learn, obviously, the objectives, but that there's no assessment. They just simply, they get the certificate based upon their participation in some type of learning event. Then you get into some distinctions between letters after the name, like when you, with the CDAO, people that successfully complete that and fulfill all eligibility requirements are able to put initials after their name. And having to explain to people that in a certificate program that certificates generally, 98% of the time, that's not something that you go through and you're able to put initials after your name. It's just there's just different ways of fulfilling these type of programs, be a certification or certificate. I think that's mainly what we've tried to explain to them and why we've developed a different product for different functions, per se. In this case, assisted living being a certification. But for the sales and marketing, at least where we're capturing specific skills, where a certificate made more sense. And then explaining to them that, hey, at one point in time, there may be an initiative that Argentum will undertake where we do develop a formal certification for sales and marketing roundtable. But for right now, our leaders have basically said that's more important to develop this program on competencies, and that's why the certificate made a lot more sense for that. So it's just been, as I said, a giant learning curve, and just trying to make the distinctions between certificate programs and certifications, and why certain programs fit better into one or the other.
Well, and it sounds like then what you're trying to do is just be as transparent and open as possible about what drives the decisions, and that there may be things that lead to a different decision in the future, as you were saying, could be a certification for those sales counselors in the future. So, and I would say,
and the other thing that we have made a decision at Argentum, whether we are doing certifications or certificates, is that we intend for every one of our certifications and certificates to have some assessment component. Because we feel right now, we know there's a lot of, I would say a lot of chatter and clutter out there about certain things, and we just feel that for the investment that our professionals will make in these, that we want it to mean something, that they have actually not only gone through any training or eligibility requirements, but that they, at the end of the day, they're having to pass a psychometrically valid examination that truly tests the competencies that we have written into each of our either certification or certificate programs.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, to have that, to be able to have the data to show that, yes, learning actually happened. It seems great. So next question is, if an organization is considering an assessment-based certificate, but they haven't really done anything yet, where or how would you recommend that they get started?
I think the first thing to get started, and I know it's usually the first step that groups do, but I find unless they've had a professional testing organization or somebody that has experience in building these programs, is to get together with a group of stakeholders and to really figure out what you're trying to build. And a lot of those questions kind of answer themselves. I mean, when you get together, for instance, with the sales and marketing, with the Senior Living Sales Counselor Certificate Program, we basically sat those professionals in a room and said, okay, we know that the underlying problem that you want to address is, or the challenge is that we're getting a lot of folks that don't have senior living knowledge, and we have to come up with a program that gives them that knowledge so that they're better able to represent the different levels of senior living, but also to be able to identify what the needs are. So I think through going through that process of what we want to accomplish with the particular program through that one meeting, I really think that sets the stage for everything else. In a lot of ways, it's probably the most difficult meeting just because everybody's probably got their own ideas, but the great thing is usually by the end of those meetings, everybody is really in unison about what needs to be accomplished through a particular program, and really at the end, what are those underlying components that are so vital to building the program out, leading to either the certification program or certificate program.
All right, so starting point is being crystal clear on what you want to accomplish within ABC and getting those stakeholders involved in that discussion. So, it sounds like about, 2/3 or so through your ABC. So if you had a chance to do it again, is there anything that you'd do differently in terms of the design or the development at this point, or any sort of ahas that you've had along the way?
I think the big aha, and this probably goes with the certification program too, is you really do need probably more volunteers as far as their service as subject matter experts than we probably initially planned for. As you get into these programs, I mean, obviously everybody has day jobs usually that are working on these, so I think in retrospect I would have probably shot a little bit higher on my initial targets for the number of volunteers I needed for each of the programs. Not to say we've actually hit all of our deadlines, but I think it would have been a much easier process with more people involved.
Excellent. And so, we've been talking so far largely about the assessment-based certificate that Argentum is working on, but I'd like to widen the scope a little bit and just get your broader take on learning these days and what's happening in learning that's exciting to you. And this might be something that is involved in what Argentum is doing with learning, or it could just be something that excites you as an individual lifelong learner.
I think one thing that we're doing at Argentum, or we're getting ready to embark on, which I am very excited about, is we're actually going to be looking at developing a comprehensive survey for our membership to find out how they are filling both statutory and or company and optional professional development needs within their companies. And we're doing that basically to find out, what are their reliance on and how often they use third-party education partners, how much of that they're doing and what they're doing in-house, and also, particularly among the professionals, the C-suite executives, where are they going for their lifelong learning and, or if it's mandated, their professional requirements, continuing education. And I think the exciting part for us is that it will help us identify niches that we can fill. I mean, the last thing that we want to do is compete with anything that's doing well for our company. So I think it will really be enlightening for us to look at the data when we get that back and to have a lot of our questions answered, and then for us to be much more tactical and strategic about what the need is out there and what role Argentum can play in that. I think the other thing that we're really looking at is we know that there's a lot of, particularly at the university community college level, there's some great continuing education and just great topical courses that are out there for senior living professionals. And we're really trying to, not only at the university level, but I think in general, to see what we can do to make those opportunities as distance learning friendly as possible. Because the one challenge we have in our industry is that as much as our companies would love to send people for 2 or 3 week courses, the reality is that's not going to happen. So what we want to be able to do is to really look at increasing opportunities, learning opportunities for our members from a distance learning and digital standpoint.
Well, that sounds great. Sounds like both that focus on digital and that comprehensive survey, both of those are really targeted at helping you understand your members' needs, which then is a great starting place to find, as you said, those niches that you can fill to make sure they're getting all the learning that they need. So the next to last question, and this is one we like to ask everyone that we interview for the Leading Learning podcast, and that's just, how do you approach your own lifelong learning?
Yeah, and I think I saw that question. I was very, I'm lucky because in one sense I do have a professional credential that I maintain. So one thing I had always done, I belong to the American Society of Association Executive and had their certified association executive credential. So there is a professional development opportunity. But one thing I've done personally with mine is I've always attended ASAE events, and certainly it's broadened my knowledge of the association management space. But as in the last few years, as we've talked about over the last several minutes about Argentum's foray into professional certifications and certificate programs, I've become active with another organization, the Institute for Credentialing Excellence, and by attending their conferences and different seminars, I've gotten a lot of very useful information, particularly impactful as Argentum begins our journey into certifications and certificates. So I've been very fortunate to be able to find organizations and learning opportunities, not only to have helped me in my association management career in general, but now specifically in the last couple of years, specialty training, particular to people that are running credentialing organizations. And that's one thing that Argentum did, is we have formed a credentialing organization that's separately incorporated. It's called the Senior Living Certification Commission, and they've got their own board, own separate governance. And the reason we did that is we, obviously, the autonomy from Argentum for this, but we also ultimately want to have our certifications accredited by a third party, knowing that it's a higher standard for us to meet, but also at the end of the day, if we're able to achieve that accreditation, it will be a much more valuable credential for our certificates.
Well, great. Yeah, it sounds like both those examples, the CAE and then what you've been doing with ICE as well, that those have been really targeted and very helpful to you as you've embarked on these certificate and certification work at Argentum. So it's great to have learning that you can put to use right away. So last question for you, Paul, just if listeners want to know more about Argentum, or to the extent that you're open to it, connect with you, where should they go?
First, our Argentum website is Argentum, ARGENTUM.org. They can visit our website. We have a lot of information about not only our learning, but general organizational information. I had just referenced the Senior Living Certification Commission, which is our credentialing organization that right now houses the Certified Director of Assisted Living credential. That can be, we have a website for that organization. It's SLCC Certification, all one word, .org. And I would be more than happy to speak with anybody and certainly learn about what others are doing along similar pursuits. My email is pwilliams, PWILLIAMS, @argentum.org. And my phone number is area code 703-562-1183.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Paul, for making time to talk with me.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Lisa. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So that wraps up our interview with Paul Williams. As we're exiting, we want to say thanks once again to Castle, a full-service certification and licensure testing company that also offers its clients a variety of learning solutions capabilities. You can find out more about Castle's custom learning solutions at leadinglearning.com/Castle.
To get show notes for this episode, go to leadinglearning.com/episode 86. While you're there, you will see various options for subscribing to the podcast. And if you're getting value out of the podcast, we would be truly grateful if you would subscribe.
We would also be ever so grateful if you would take just a minute to give us a rating and review on iTunes. All you have to do is point your browser to leadinglearning.com/iTunes. And as we always say, we appreciate knowing that people value this podcast, and it also makes it easier for others to find Leading Learning.
Also, consider telling others about the podcast. You can send out a tweet by going to leadinglearning.com/share, or if tweeting isn't your thing, you can pick another social network of your preference and spread the good word that way.
So thanks as always, and we'll see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.